Hi, and welcome back to Psychology 2. This is part 2 of personality and measurement. So we're going to get right into it. We're going to start with trait perspective. A trait is a relatively stable and consistent personal characteristic that it's used to describe and explain personality. So trait theory of personality are attempts to explain personality and the differences between people in terms of their personal characteristics. So we're going to start with contemporary psychologists. Now, contemporary psychologists assume that traits are inheritable and are embedded in the nervous system. We'll start with Gordon Allport. He was the first trait theorist that we're going to look at. Allport cataloged about 18,000 human traits from dictionaries. It was the first that's been used in research by many psychologists. So from that, Hans Eysenck, his trait theory is a two-dimensional view. Hans Eysenck believed that personality was genetic and had very minimal environmental influences. So his belief was you're born with stuff and it's not much of what happens around you outside in the world, your parents, your friends, and the world outside that will influence your personality. But he did identify and he researched on two personality traits. The first was introversion and extroversion were the two. That was the first group of traits. Extroverts are sociable, outgoing, and active, whereas introverts are more withdrawn, quiet, and introspective. The second grouping was emotional stability versus instability, or neuroticism. Unstable, neurotic people are anxious, excitable, and easily distressed, whereas emotionally stable people are calm, even-tempered, and more easygoing. Now, this is all still very early in preliminary work, so some of the following work, including Raymond Cattell's trait theory contributions, include utilizing mathematical approach to determining how to measure personality. Using factor analysis, it's a mathematical technique, Cattell was able to demonstrate that those traits that were highly related to one another could be narrowed from hundreds down to 16. Now, related to that, what's known as the Big Five, the five-factor model, is based on recent research and has focused on 5 basic personality factors. The first being extroversion. Extroverts, as mentioned earlier, are sociable, outgoing, talkative, assertive, persuasive, decisive, active, versus the introverts, which tend to be more withdrawn, quiet, passive, retiring, and introspective. The second trait is conscientiousness. Highly conscientious people are dependable, organized, reliable, responsible, thorough, hardworking, and persevering versus the low dependable, which are disorganized, impulsive, unreliable, irresponsible, careless, negligent, lazy. Now you're hearing different things that we would say about someone's personality, things that we would describe. These are traits. Agreeable, pleasant, good-natured, warm, sympathetic, and cooperative versus low conscientiousness, where you get unfriendly, unpleasant, aggressive, argumentative, cold, hostile, and vindictive. Also bear in mind, these are on a continuum. With this one we're going to do open to experiences. You have open to experiences on one side and closed to experiences on the other side, and you can be somewhere in between here too. Open to experiences, these people are more imaginative, intellectually curious, and broad-minded versus someone who is low on this. They're concrete-minded, very practical, and narrow interests. Then the fifth trait is neuroticism, which is in emotional stable versus instability. The instability, the experience is negative emotions, moody, irritable, nervous, and they worry quite a bit. Whereas the more emotionally stable, they're emotionally calm, even-tempered, easygoing, and relaxed. Now, these factors are are related to basic temperaments, which and are largely inborn. Personalities tend to mature rather than be shaped by the environmental conditions. Personalities are affected by culture. So if we are to evaluate the trait perspective in the Big Five, well, trait theorists have focused much attention on the development of personality tests, not having a definitive one. It helps spawn theories about the fit between personality and certain kinds of jobs. Trait theory also has tended to be more descriptive rather than explanatory. Now, recent research shows a link between our genes and personality traits. A particular sequence within the third chromosome causes an increase in oxytocin receptors, which makes some people more likely to be optimistic and have higher self-esteem and may be more resistant to depression. Now, the next grouping of personality theories we'll look at is learning theory perspective, and this is one that carries through a number of psychological theories. Now, we're going to start with behaviorism. John Watson is one of the original theorists in behavioral psychology, and he had a famous quote about being able to raise any healthy infant to become whatever you want. The point was that you can shape behavior. Behaviorism views personality as being plastic, and therefore shapeable, that situational variables and environmental influences are the key shapers of human preferences and behavior. Skinner suggested, now B.F. Skinner was an important behavioralist, he suggested that environmental influences such as the parental approval and social customs shape us into wanting certain things and not wanting others. He was all about consequences. Whatever you positively reinforce as a consequence to certain behaviors gets increased or increases the likelihood they're going to be repeated. So the more that a parent shapes or rewards a behavior, the more that behavior will reappear. Now, some of the theorists object to the behavioralist notion that because of that, they downplay the importance of consciousness and choice. Now, the next group we'll look at is related, but it's the social cognitive theory. And it states that personality is the result of both the environment and personal cognitive factors. One of the primary theoretical investigators here, Albert Bandura, called this relationship reciprocal determination. The environment, the external environment, and behavior and personal cognitive factors are the three components of reciprocal determination, each influencing and being influenced by the other. Now, observational learning or modeling is therefore an important to Bandura in his theory on personality development. Social cognitive theorists see people as influencing their environment just as much as their environment influences them. Personal variables, situational variables, and the behavior must all be considered if we are to understand people. Bandura also indicated that the particular important cognitive factors, one is known as self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is the perception that people hold of their own ability to perform competently and successfully in whatever they make an attempt at. People with high self-efficacy will approach new situations confidently and will persist in their efforts because they believe they are likely to succeed. Now, people with low self-efficacy, they will expect failure and may even avoid challenges. Now, within social cognitive theory, we can also look to what's known as gender typing, where children learn what is masculine and feminine by observing and learning. Now, part of this is what's known as socialization. By observing others, you learn what's important and what's valued to be masculine and feminine. Parents, adults, and other children inform children about how they are expected to behave. The gender schema theory, this emphasizes the role that cognition in gender typing, that is the way we think in gender typing, cultures tend to polarize males and females into opposing groups. Well, if you've taken my gender studies course, you know that there's a gender fluidity. There's the area in between that also matters. Social life is organized around exclusive gender roles, and children need to blend into the gender schema of their culture. Now, the next grouping we'll look at are what's known as, and it's probably one of the more recent forms of psychological study, it's the humanistic perspective. And according to the humanistic psychology, human nature is innately good and that people have free will and a tendency towards growth and realization of their potential. Humanists largely deny that there's a dark or evil side to human nature. They don't believe that people are shaped strictly by the environment or ruled by the unconscious forces. People are capable of free choice, self-fulfillment, and ethical behavior. Now, a primary theorist in this area of human psychology is Abraham Maslow, and the challenge of self-actualization. Maslow saw that motivational factors are the root to personality. He developed what we know as the hierarchy of needs. Our basic motivation at the bottom, progressing through to more potentially achieving self-actualization, where self-actualization means developing to one's fullest potential. Another theorist in the area of humanistic psychology is Carl Rogers and his self theory. Carl Rogers described the emergence of the self-concept. The self-concept emerges as a result of repeated experiences with terms such as I, me, mine. We need, he learned, positive regard. This warmth, love, and acceptance, sympathy, and respect for the significant people in our lives. Accept people as having intrinsic merit regardless of their behavior at the moment. Rogers wrote that people shape themselves through free choice and action. Choices are made on the basis of our values. The self-concept and the frames of reference, well, the self-concept consists of our impressions of ourselves and our evaluations of our adequacy. The frames of reference, on the other hand, are unique ways of looking at ourselves and the world. Through unconditional positive regard, well, this is the accepting of people as having intrinsic merit regardless of their behavior at the moment. And if parents show a conditional positive regard, then children may develop conditions of worth and come to think that they have merit only if they behave the way that as their parents wish them to behave. Now, conditions of worth force us to act according to someone else's values rather than to our own. So Rogers suggested that the path to self-actualization requires getting in touch with our general feelings and accepting them, acting upon them. Rogers believed that we have mental images of what we are capable of becoming, and these are learned self-ideals. We are motivated to reduce the discrepancy between the self-concept and our self-ideals. So if we're going to look at evaluating of the humanistic perspective, well, humanistic perspective helped emphasize the importance of personal experience. And the humanistic approach sees humans as free to make choices and assume personal freedom. Now, there is another relatively new perspective, and it's the socio-cultural perspective. Some psychologists believe that personality cannot be understood without reference to the socio-cultural perspective. Aspects of culture, religion, and race should be considered. Now, individualism versus collectivism. So if I'm looking at the who am I in this cultural setting, Well, the individualist cultures, these are defined where the people in these individualistic cultures define themselves in terms of their personal identities and to give priority to their own personal goals. You know, people in Canada, the United States, and many northern European nations tend to be individualistic. Capitalist systems tend to foster individualism to a degree. The alternative to individualism is collectivists. And here, the tendency is to define themselves in terms of the group to which they belong and give priority to the group's goals. Many people of Africa, Asia, and Central and South America tend to be collectivists. So if we're going to evaluate the sociocultural perspective, well, the sociocultural perspective provides valuable insights into the role of ethnicity, gender, and culture, and the socioeconomic status and personality formation. It also enhances our sensitivity to cultural differences, enhances the appreciation of the richness of the human behavior and mental process. Well, there we go. That completes our review of the theoretical perspectives. We can now move towards measurement of personality. So let's begin. Measurement of personality. Scientific personality tests remind us that there is a science behind the measurement of personality. As such, there are important terms to review before starting to look at personality measurement tests. First, and this isn't applying just to personality tests, this applies to all research. So first thing to worry about in terms of any tests, validity. Now, validity is the extent to which the test measures what it's supposed to measure. It's kind of like if you use a weigh scale, it's supposed to measure your weight. It's not there to measure creativity. If it did measure creativity, it's not a valid weigh scale. The second term is reliability. The stability of one's results from one testing to another is what makes it reliable. So again, if I use the weigh scale and I stand on the scale once every minute for 5 minutes, I would expect the same measured weight rather than 5 different weights. If I have 5 different weights, then chances are it's not a reliable weigh scale. The third term, standardization. Now this just means that the process that checks out the scores, validity and reliability of a test with people of various ages and various groups. So in order for something to be standardized, not only do I need to stand on the weigh scale, but people from different groups, different ages, different genders, different ethnicities should also stand on the scale to see what their results are. That makes it more standardized. Fourth, behavior rating scales is another form. Now, this is where trained observers check off on a checklist the occurrence of a specific behavior within a certain time frame. As a behavior consultant, that's what I did a fair bit of, and you might be observing certain behaviors of a child at a daycare, but you're only doing that every other 5-minute period of time. And so if in the period of time where I'm observing and I see behavior that I'm observing occur, I check off that's occurred, and I'm counting that number. The fifth type is the aptitude assessment, and it aids in gaining insight into whether individuals are suited for certain occupations. And that's a specific type of personality test that sort of looks at the relationship between personality traits and what traits are required for specific occupations, and then creating a match. So we're going to move into something that's fairly, I don't know if you might be aware of this or not, but objective tests. Objective tests present respondents with a standardized group of test items in the form of questionnaire. Responses are limited to specific range of answers. Now, a forced choice format, alternatively, respondents are asked to indicate which of 2 statements is truer to them. It can be a difficult test to do because you might have questions and you can't ask questions. You just answer within the 2 statements that are provided with a forced choice format. The second format of this form of personality test is what's known as the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, or the MMPI, and it contains hundreds of items in true or false format. An inventory is an objective paper and pencil test with questions about a person's thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, which can be scored according to a standard procedure. Trait theorists prefer the use of inventories to assess personality. The MMPI-2 is designed to screen and diagnose psychiatric disorders. Now, another form of test that's very popular because of how, when it's used, it can draw out people's personality. It's called projective tests. In a projective test, people respond to ink blots, drawings of ambiguous human situations, or incomplete sentences for which there is no obvious correct or incorrect response, and the like by projecting their own inner thoughts and feelings and fears and conflicts onto the test material. The two that we're going to reference, and it might make more sense as to what they are when you hear them, and one is called the Rorschach inkblot test. The other is the Thematic Appreciation Test, or the TAT. We'll start with the Rorschach inkblot test. Now, while viewing, you could be asked to sit down and view 10 ink blots. 5 are in black and white, and 5 are in color. And the test taker is asked to describe everything he or she thinks about what each ink blot looks like or resembles. Now, a response that reflects based on the shape of the blot is considered a sign of adequate reality testing. A response that integrates several features of the blot is considered a sign of high intellectual functioning. Now, supporters believe that it provides insight into a person's intelligence, interests, cultural background, personality traits, psychological disorders, and many other variables. Critics, of course, they argue that there's very little evidence to support the test's validity. Now, the Thematic Appreciation Test, the TAT, was developed by Murray and Morgan, and it consists of drawings, and subjects are asked to make up stories about the drawings. Now, there's one blank card and 19 other cards showing vague or ambiguous black and white drawings of human figures in various situations. The test taker is told to, first, make up a plot or a story which might be used as an illustration. Secondly, what is the relationship between the individuals in the picture? And then thirdly, what are their thoughts and what are their feelings? And then lastly, what might be the outcome? The assumption is that we are likely to project our own needs into these responses to these ambiguous situations, even if we're unaware of them or reluctant to talk about them. They may, in fact, come out. All right. There. That wraps up personality theory and measurement. Next week, we're going to be exploring psychological disorders. All right, everybody. Take care and keep up the good work. Bye now.